My name is Adria Vogt. I'm our president and CEO at the museum. And we're really honored to be able to recognize our veterans today, and specifically the long tradition of Native American service in the armed forces.
We know that there are Native American stories that are in so many of these different battles. We know that they were important and integral parts of not only the French and Indian War, but also the American Revolution and a number of these kind of nation-defining moments that happened afterwards. Why are we only hearing about these stories now?
I think that a lot of organizations, individuals and organizations are learning more about their history, about their genealogy, and organizations like museums, organizations like ours, our partners like the Catawba, and even the Old Mecklenburg Genealogical Society are working to find the individual stories that really complete the narrative of our nation. And of course, when it comes to our military history and our veterans, people of color, Indigenous people, Black people and other people are part of that story, and organizations are working hard to tell those stories and to be able to share that narrative, the complete story of our history with the public.
And we know that Kings Mountain in particular has a project called Project Patriot, and we saw that they are honoring some of these lesser known voices that really do complete this narrative here. So it's exciting to see this progress being made.
Right. Project Patriot is a National Society Daughters of the American Revolution project that's been going on, I think, since around 2013, or maybe even earlier than that. But in 2016, they specifically, a local chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution erected a monument at the Battle of Kings Mountain site, which is just near us here in Charlotte. And that monument recognized 3 African American patriots who fought at the Battle of Kings Mountain. There are efforts like that across the nation to recognize those individuals, bring those voices, those names to light, and really tell the complete story and recognize that it wasn't just Scots-Irish, German, Presbyterian folks who had immigrated here who were part of this early narrative, and certainly of now a long tradition of military history in the United States.
I'm Keith Brown, Owen Keith Brown, formerly known as Little Bear here at the Catawba Nation. I am a elder, almost 70 years old, pretty close. And I grew up here at the Catawba Reservation, in the 50s and 60s, and things have drastically changed since then. The geography here and the makeup of the reservation. I joined the Army in 1972, and I spent 3 years in the Army and got back out in 75. But again, I re-enlisted in 76 and stayed until 1993, where I retired as a Sergeant First Class.
We know that the Catawba in particular, and a number of Native peoples in North and South Carolina, have a incredibly long tradition of service in the armed forces. We know that a number of people actually assisted in the American Revolution, fought on both sides, but were instrumental to a number of different battles. And was that a part of your thought process when you joined, or was it something else? What made you want to be a part of the Army?
Yes, it was part of my, thought process. All the, at the time the draft was going on, and I didn't get drafted into the Army, and of course Vietnam was going on, and I didn't get drafted. But, a lot of my other friends had been in the Army already into Vietnam, and they were joining up, and some of them, went to Vietnam, and quite a number of them did. But, we've always had a rich history of being warriors. I think that's part of our society. I know it's part of our society as Native people. And they had served, from early 1700s being, the militia for the state of South Carolina, actually, and serving during the French and Indian Wars and Revolutionary War. I had ancestors. Being a Brown, I had, ancestors Browns, a list of Catawbas named Browns and Ayers. My mother was an Ayers, and the Harrises, and they're all family, part of my family. And the Civil War, World War One. My grandpa was in the Army during World War One. My dad in the Army during World War Two, and so it was part of, I guess, my thought process. My want to be a part of, and that's the way our Native people kind of today's keep up our warriors traditions, I guess you might say.
You mentioned that a number of people in your family served in the Army. Was that a reason that you decided to enlist in particular in the Army, or what brought that for you?
I think it was, being that I came from a family that was in the Army, of course, though I had many other relatives, first cousins and stuff that were in, the Navy, and, a number were in the Navy, and some of the Marine Corps, and some in the Air Force. But I think being, that my dad was in the Army and my grandfather was in the Army, that kind of, actually, all this number of years I was in, I was never really assigned to, really, I guess, combat. I spent 3 years at Fort Benning, Georgia, the first 3 years I was in the Army. They kept me at Fort Benning. I was a clerk. I was a supply clerk and worked in the office for the first 3 years there. Very, very, spent most of my time working, there as a supply clerk, doing requisitions and, stuff like this, and keeping property books. After I got out and I went back into the Army, though, I ended up, they didn't put me in the same field. I ended up as a target acquisition for the field artillery, and did, some stints in the field, again, just mostly, training, really what it might say, combat duty, but I did spend, about 6 or 7 years as target acquisition for the field artillery. After that, though, I was drafted into recruiting duty, and I did recruiting duty for about 6 years, signed to a Knoxville recruiting company. So I did a lot of signed to Tennessee and Kentucky area as a recruiter. And after that, I went back into, left recruiting and went back to, they sent me back to supply field. And I went to Panama for about 1.5 years. And at that time, I worked in a office, a big theater material management center near the canal there. So again, administrative type work. And after that, I spent my last 2 years in Fort Stewart, Georgia, as a platoon sergeant in a support battalion.
But now, of course, you're back in Rock Hill. You're back in Catawba Nation. Was there a particular reason you decided to come back, or I mean, obviously you finished up in in Georgia.
Yes. Well, yes, I guess this was always home. It always tugged me, this river here, the Catawba River is lifeblood, I guess you might say, of society, of really lifeblood of our people. And this was family, I guess. I came from a very large family. I have 6 sisters and 3 brothers. And so I came back here and began to, work for the Cultural Center for about 3 years as an exhibits coordinator. And I'm a potter. I do Catawba pottery and storytelling.
I was actually going to ask you about your pottery. I know that you have been a kind of master in pottery for a while now. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your pottery?
I'm very fortunate. The pottery tradition has been very important to the Catawba people because, in the beginning, Native people, our ancestors, mainly the women were the potters back in the days of past, and they made the pottery that they needed to, cook out of to carry things in and utilitarian type of goods. Pieces and smoking pipes. Men often would make pipes, or the women would, for smoking their tobacco. And so when I was growing up, I first helped my grandmother, dig clay, because we get our own clay from the river banks down here, and dig the clay, process the clay, and then in the end burn these pottery pieces. They're put in a pit in the ground, and we burn them that way. And so I helped her to do that. And when I was out of the Army after I got out in 1975 and 76, there was an effort, a class taught by all these elderly ladies, including my grandmother and others, that trying to keep the pottery tradition alive. And I was part of that. It was my responsibility to dig the clay and process the clay and burn the pottery pieces. In the end, that was my job in that class, which lasted about 6 months. And that was the first time I made any pottery pieces. And of course, I still have a few of those pieces, but when I came back out of the Army, I started to make a little bit, and I'm still learning, I think, and I still make a little bit, and not as much as I maybe should, but I make I'm known a lot for my pipes, the effigy pipes, the turtle pipes, snake pipes, and especially a bear pipe, since I'm known as a little bear. So,
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with all of us this morning. Are there any kind of final last thoughts you want to leave with us?
Just that, our Catawba people were always known as, great warriors and defenders of the colonies, protecting the colonies. And I'd say we were even, sort of a militia for the state of South Carolina, and served with General Washington during the French and Indian Wars as scouts, and then during the Revolutionary War, we joined the colonists. And our people, even our leaders, used in military ranks, such as the general was the chief, and he had his colonels and his lieutenant colonels and his our majors and captains. And they used that title up until about up until 1830s, when the last of these men passed away. They used that title, military title.
Mm-hmm.
That was very important. I thought very awesome to know that.
Well, it's a part of the history. It's the tradition. This feeling of connection. And I appreciate you. Mm-hmm.
Another thing too, our people did this and served and died in the wars. We were pretty fortunate. I think there are about 50 men here from during World War II, a large majority that went into the military. And these men, they weren't even state of South Carolina didn't even recognize them as citizens until 1943. And many of them had been fighting for many generations to protect the colonies and to protect the United States.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this Veterans Day. Thank you so much for your service, service to the United States, and for being willing to talk with us today. I had such a great time hearing about kind of your life and what you've accomplished and what you've done both in the armed service and what you've done for the Catawba Cultural Center. So I appreciate your time here. Thank you so much for joining us. I know our audience is going to have a great time.
Yes, and I especially honor and respect and give my condolences or my blessings to all our Catawba veterans today and past and present have served. Thank you.